Even if you are the winner, that means that you are now married to a loser. Right? So that's not a good place for you as the winner either. Nobody comes out on top that way if somebody's going to win. It has to be the two of us together figuring out what's best for the two of us together.
You're listening to the Nacho Kids podcast, where we discuss all things step-family related. Real stories, real people, real help. Your hosts are the creators of the Nacho Kids Method and the Nacho Kids Academy Step-Family Coaching Team, Lori and David Sims.
Today we have Raffi Bilek. Hey, Raffi, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am a marriage counselor in Baltimore. That's the main thing I do. And I've worked with couples in all kinds of different situations at all kinds of stages. I also sort of expanded out into working all over the world, especially since I put out this book. I've been hearing from people, just calling in from strange places who are looking for some help. And I've really enjoyed it. I just really love working with couples and trying to get them on point, get their marriage dialed in, which is important, not just for them, but the whole family really benefits from them being in a good place. So, whether a blended family or a nuclear family, that's really where it starts. So I'm really just big on getting those relationships dialed in and making sure people are happy in their lives.
That's awesome. And what's the name of your book?
It's called The Couples Communication Handbook, The Skills You Never Learned for the Marriage You Always Wanted.
I need that book. I haven't read it.
Everyone needs that book. Everyone needs that book.
Well, I was thinking about this when I knew that I was interviewing you, and I was like, I think part of the problem is, as children, we are not given the communication skills.
I am amazed that we still do things in school like trigonometry and, the history of what nation, whatever, and the important things you need, like, communication or, taxes and stuff that is very useful, we don't get. I mean, this seems like a really important thing. How do you talk to people when difficult things come up?
Right. Yeah. I know for myself, there are a few things that I'm hesitant to discuss. And one of those things is money.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't between David and I, but this is, say, for instance, I go somewhere and take somebody with me, and it's just easier for me to buy the food than do two orders. And then, they're like, oh, I'll pay you back. Well, then when nothing's ever mentioned, I feel really weird bringing it up.
It is awkward.
It is.
What's interesting is this is really a cultural thing. In other countries, you can go somewhere and people will be like, so what do you do? Oh, okay. And how much do you make? And and that's a question people just ask and answer. Whereas in America, you might as well be asking, about like body part size. Like, so tell me about, and then people they'd freak out. Like, you can't ask somebody about their income like that. But there are other countries where that's totally normal. So it's certainly a cultural thing that we are used to, that talking about our financial lives seems very, very private.
Yes.
Very comfortable.
Yes. And that's something else that we can help our kids with.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot that we teach our kids by the way that we act and we behave, far more than anything we tell them is what we show them. And then what we get them to do on their own.
Yeah. So let's talk about communication between adults. For instance, David and I. He's not here, so I can talk all about him.
Great.
One of the things that we've noticed lately is, we noticed it a couple years ago, when I ask for help, when I say, hey, can you help me, blah, 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 I mean right then. I don't say right then, but that's what I mean. So if I don't hear movement or see him coming, within 30 seconds, I do it myself. And I'm not happy because I'm doing it myself, right?
Right.
And I've learned with him, when he asks me to do something, my first response is, I can't right now.
Because you think he means right now.
Right. He does. Yeah. He doesn't mean right now. He doesn't say right now. I mean right now. I don't say right now.
Right.
That comes from my mom. So my right now, I need to start expressing that right now to people because it's not fair.
I'll tell you what Mr. Rogers says.
I love Mr. Rogers.
Nobody knows what you're thinking or feeling unless you tell them.
Right.
We have so much in our heads that we assume is obvious. Mm-hmm. And people are so different in ways that you cannot even imagine, that it doesn't occur to us that you would think any different. When you say, would you please change the light bulb? It doesn't occur to you that anybody would think that you meant later or tomorrow. You just mean now.
Right.
Even when he asks you, could you go pick up the milk? he doesn't mean now, but that's, he doesn't have any sense that you think it differently. Now, you guys have been through this a couple times and are probably starting to get used to it, but for sure it needs to be said explicitly a little bit until we get to know each other better, until we are more in each other's heads, because why would I know what you think? Again, I just assume that's the way everybody is because that's the way I am.
Right.
It tends not to work so well in the long run.
Yeah. And so that could lead to expectations.
Yeah.
And so this is probably a really good thing that I have you on here today. I shared a story recently in my email, my Nacho newsletter, that I did not call my dad on Christmas. I know. I thought about it, but things were chaotic. I was like, I'll call him later because that way I can focus on the call. And then later, 6:30, I'm like, well, he's probably already in bed because he's old and they go to bed at dark,
Right.
Long story short, I didn't think anything else about it, which is really odd that I didn't think about it. You know what I mean? I didn't make that call. I didn't think about it the next day. So I called him a few days later, and needless to say, he's very upset with me.
Sure.
A couple years before, on my birthday, he put happy birthday on Facebook and didn't call me. And I'm like, what the crap? So I called him and I said, you are my father. You must call me on my birthday. And he's like, well, I'll put it on Facebook. I'm like, no, you're supposed to call me. So my expectations were not met for my birthday, but the way I handled it was completely different than how he handled not getting that phone call on Christmas. Now, again, I cannot tell you or understand myself why I didn't call. He doesn't really like Christmas. Maybe that was it in the back of my head. I don't know. And I know too, because I know my dad so well, there's no need for us to talk about this because he's not going to see my side.
Nope.
I can see his side, but he's never going to see my side and it will turn into another argument. Mm-hmm. So what do you do when you have things like that are so high conflict that, I know if I bring it up to my dad, he's, well, you blah, blah, blah. It's going to start off bad. So what do you suggest in those situations?
Starting right off with the toughies, huh?
Uh-huh.
No softball over here.
No softball.
It's tough because your dad is your dad. Mm-hmm. And certainly, folks from this older generation are coming from a different place. I think more and more in the modern world, people are trying to move towards more understanding, parenting with, positivity and empathy rather than force and hitting. I mean, people are not so into spanking these days. And I'm sure your dad is one of those who says, well, if people should be spanked more, it would help a lot and all these,
Yeah. What's funny is he never spanked us, but my mom tore our tails up.
Yeah. And that's kind of the way it was back then. And, no judgment. Everybody was doing the best they could with the tools they had. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that there's a great way to resolve this with your father, to do it differently. I mean, you can ask him to do it, not to speak to you the way he did. Mm-hmm. But you're right. He may not see your side. He may not want to see your side. And that's unfortunate. That kind of limits how close this relationship will be, right? If somebody is always right and refuses to see another perspective, there's a limit to how close you're going to get to that person.
Right.
But in your marriage, one would hope that you can have that conversation and say, hey, look, I would like this to be a really close, intimate relationship. Let's do this differently. Can we talk in a way that we're both hearing each other? And of course, this is what I do in my work all the time. And this is what the book is all about, is how to have those conversations and feel like we are a team. Mm-hmm. Feel like it's not adversarial, but collaborative.
Right.
Like, hey, we don't agree about this. We don't like what happened, but can we work on this so that we are still a married couple with intimacy, with connection, instead of two fighting people?
Right.
There are certainly marriages where one person doesn't want to do that or isn't able to because they're impaired by some mental or cognitive issue. And it's sad, but there's a limit. It takes two people to have a relationship. And if one person does not want to relate to you, meaning to get into your world and see what it's like over there, there's a limit there. There's a boundary.
Mm-hmm. I remember watching Dr. Phil. Golly, this is many, many years ago. And there was a guy that was doing stuff on the internet that his wife didn't like. And he told Dr. Phil, he's like, well, I don't see anything wrong with it. And Dr. Phil's like, it doesn't matter what you see.
Yeah.
She sees something wrong with it.
Right.
And as a team, you work together. So if one has an issue with it, you both need to have an issue with it, or you at least need to understand, hey, she has an issue with it, so I need to not do this.
Right. Well, so I would say that just because she has an issue with it doesn't mean that you have to stop. It just means that you have to take into account. We have to talk about this, right? Maybe you shouldn't be allowed to that. Maybe the wife has a problem. I don't want you having any friends outside the house. Like that might be very extreme. I don't know that I would say you have to do that, but you do have to take that into account. Doesn't matter how extreme it is. You have to say, well, what is it about that bothers you and why and how? And let's understand that. Right. And of course, if somebody, again, if they're that rigid and demanding that they say you cannot speak to anybody except for me, that may be a problem for our relationship.
But that's a ridiculous boundary.
Yeah. I made an extreme.
It's good to make extremes though, because that's what people relate to.
Yeah. But so you can still talk about that and understand like, hey, why is that important to you? What about this means something to you? And that means we're a team. Even though we may not agree on the outcome, right? The outcome we'll figure out later. Let's first understand what's going into this.
Right. I guess I should have prefaced the Dr. Phil thing with saying that he was talking crap to other women on the internet. So yeah, he would need to stop that.
Right.
Yeah.
Although the truth is, there are some people who, can, like let's say open marriages or whatever else there is. The boundaries that I think are important and that you think are important may not be important to somebody else. Right. Again, you guys figure it out. You guys have to talk about it. Instead of arguing or instead of putting your foot down, let's understand each other and figure out how you can best connect.
Right. I think when I looked you up yesterday, maybe it was a quote you referenced.
But the thing is, even if you are the winner, that means that you are now married to a loser. Right. So that's not a good place for you as the winner either. Nobody comes out on top that way if somebody's going to win. It has to be the two of us together, figuring out what's best for the two of us together.
Right. Now, I've noticed too that through my many years that a lot of times we think we love somebody and what we truly love is how they make us feel.
Yeah.
We may not even really know them as a person. I think we have to allow people to be who they are.
Yeah.
And when I say that, for instance, if David's one that likes to go to bars and drinks or whatever, and I'm not, if that's what he wants to do, and I tell him he can't do it, or however you want to phrase that, it's going to cause a problem.
Yeah.
If you can just find out what are your showstoppers, what are your hills to die on.
Yeah.
Then, and if you can't be what that person needs you to be, then there's your answer. And I am not one for promoting people splitting up, divorce, anything like that. But if you are constantly fighting to change someone, you've got to stop.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes people try to change other people because they have the sense that everyone should be like me. Again, like we were saying before, like my way is the way to do it. But sometimes it's a question of fundamental values, right? If our fundamental values are not aligned, we have a problem. There are people who can live with that. You see Republicans and Democrats married all the time, and there are lots of arguments, but they're okay with that. But there are some people for whom there's a certain value, whether it's, whatever the political issue of the day is, or religious issues, or whatever it is. If those are fundamental values and your spouse is not on board, or your partner, whatever it is, you may need to consider whether this is a relationship that's going to work for you guys.
Right. Yeah. Because you have to figure out what's so important to you.
Right.
Yeah. We all have our deal breakers, right?
Yeah. And we all have lots of things that are different that do not have to be deal breakers.
Right.
Tons of people, I'm chronically punctual. I have a problem with being punctual because I have to be there on time.
I'm the opposite. I slide in on two wheels everywhere.
Right. My wife, not so much. Okay. It bothers me. It bothers her. We've had friction about it. We've talked through it. This is not a hill to die on.
Right.
I don't need to leave my wife because she shows up late.
Right.
It's just, okay. So, but there are people who will fight about these things, and I get it. You want to get there on time. You don't want to be rushed. Sure, fine. How do we do this differently? How can we
drive separately?
Great. That's a great solution, right?
Yeah.
It's not always possible, and there will still be friction. And what I'm all about is having a conversation, even about the things that you disagree on, even the things that you want differently. We can still feel like we're doing this together.
Right. Yeah. I know David. Like I said, I slide in on two wheels everywhere, and he's ready to go 20 minutes before we need to leave.
Yeah.
And he will sit in the driveway and blow the horn. He's a button pusher. We could talk about that probably all day later, but it drives me crazy because then it stresses me out and I
Sure.
feel hurried, and it never fails. If I feel hurried, we'll leave and I'll get a mile down the road and I'm like, I forgot so and so.
Got something.
Yeah. I look at it as if I've got 10 extra minutes, I'm not going to go sit in the parking lot at work. I'm not wasting my 10 minutes. I'll do
Right.
the dishes before I leave and then slide in on two wheels.
And once it starts getting towards that time, I start sweating. I just gotta get there. I think it's a social thing. Like when I was a kid, I was always nervous to go into the party and everyone was there. So I'd get there early, and then it'd be like one person would come. Like, okay, there's one more person would come. It's like I gotta be there on time to do that. Yeah. Everyone's different, and that's
Yeah. So let's talk about from a step family standpoint. You've got, we'll just say the bio parent and the step parent, it makes it easier. And they don't agree on how each other's children are parented.
yeah, very stressful situation. I
Right.
mean, you have similar things even in a nuclear family where they don't agree on how they're managing a certain situation with the kid, or you're too hard on him, you're too soft on him. Classic. And then with step families, the ante is raised because it's your kid, it's my kid, it's not your kid, right? That's the
Yep.
whole. Okay. And I think this is, definitely one of the stressful points in a marriage. And I think it's all the same thing. It's like, hey, let's stop and understand where you're coming from.
Mhm.
What I tell people is that there have to be two conversations about this. The first conversation is the exploration conversation, where we just talk about what are the issues? What's bothering me? What's bothering you?
Mhm.
We are not going to solve the problem right now.
Mhm.
The second conversation is the resolution conversation,
Mhm.
where we will talk about what to do. But right now, we are not going to talk about what to do. We are not going to change the outcome based on this conversation.
Right.
And that takes off the pressure to move through it. Let me just understand what's bothering you. When you see me talk to Timmy this way, what is that like for you? Well, I'm stressed out. I'm worried he's going to start crying. I'm worried he's going to start tantrums. Okay, I can understand why you'd be worried about that. That makes sense. Let
Mhm.
me tell you how I'm feeling about it. I'm worried if I don't come down hard on him, then he'll do that, and he'll turn out to be a failure, and he won't, and all these things.
Yeah.
And you can understand how that makes sense to me, right? So we're just exploring the territory, trying to understand each other's internal worlds when it comes to this situation. That will set us up to come to a solution that actually works, because you cannot solve a problem that you don't understand.
Right.
It sounds pretty obvious, but we do it all the time. Oh,
Yes.
you're yelling at him, this, no, and we try to solve the problem without understanding. Like, well, why are you angry? Why are you worried? What's going
Mhm.
on under the surface? If we
Right.
can stop and figure that out, we're going to come to a much better solution afterwards, much more easily.
Right. And I'm sure you've heard of HALT. You don't have major
Oh, yeah.
discussions when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. I
Right.
told David I'd never talk to him because I'm always hungry, angry, or tired.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is true. And you have to combine that with reality, which is you're probably always hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Life is tough. If you got kids, you got multiple kids, you got step kids, it's challenging. So
Mhm.
on one hand, don't run into a conversation when you can't pull it off. On the other hand, you may need to carve out times to pull it off, right?
Right.
And sometimes that might mean skipping that or pushing this off or something, leaving the dishes in the sink overnight while
Mhm.
you guys go and have a conversation. Okay, what's going on with us here?
Right. We can't express this enough to people. It's not, we need to sit down for 2 hours. We need to hash this out and come up with a solution right now.
Right.
No, no,
Guess what? The tough problems in your life will not have solutions that you will come up with today.
right. Or tomorrow for that matter.
Right? It's
Yeah.
going to be a series of conversations, right? Whether it's how you're going to raise the kids or managing the blend
Mhm.
or, your finances or your sex life or whatever it is, these are lifelong issues that
Mhm.
will require multiple conversations over time. It's not one conversation will solve it and then we're good.
Right. I know we also suggest that if you're having a conversation with your partner and you start feeling heated, or you start feeling that they're getting heated, they're just not as responsive, they're starting to shut down. It's okay to take a
Take a
break.
break.
Yeah, not we're never going to discuss this again, but let's just table this conversation till later.
That is the first chapter in the book. That's the first and the last thing. That you cannot do this well when you're worked up.
Mhm.
Right? So, when something happens in that moment when you find out that he put the milk in the fridge empty again, that's not the time to go talk to him about it because you're really worked up about it.
Yeah, because you're going to hit him with that milk jug.
Yeah, yeah. And when you start that conversation calmly, but it goes sideways and someone gets ramped up, you take a break and you come back to it later. You don't push it under the rug, never to talk about it again.
Yep.
But you can't do it well. I've been teaching this to people for years, and I don't do it well when I'm worked up. So I'll
Right.
take a break and we'll come back to it. I think it's fine. People are angry. You can't make yourself not angry. Taking
Right.
a break is great. Right? What's
Yeah.
wrong with that? Sometimes, people feel like, oh, if my spouse is angry at me, I have to go fix it right away. No, you don't. Let
Right.
them be angry. Who
Yeah.
wants who wants someone to come up to them and try to appease them when they're angry? Take a
Mhm.
break.
Yeah.
Right? You'll be angry. Okay, you can be angry. I'll go here and I'll do the dishes, whatever, and we'll talk later when you're ready. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. It's not
Right.
great, but it's much better than the alternative, which is we turn it into a big fight because we have to talk right now, this minute, when you're too angry to talk.
Right. Yeah. And I know too, I think a lot of times people, when things come up, say the empty box, for instance, that could have blown up so much to where we're getting divorced over an empty box.
I see that all the time.
Yeah, because you can't communicate. You can't express your feelings without that emotion. And that was one of the hardest things for me because I'm a very emotional speaker. And I can't tell you how much that pause helps me though, because I pause and I'm like, is this true? Is this kind? Is this beneficial? I go through all these little questions to ask myself before I say anything, because if not, words hurt. They hurt. And we have to be careful because you can't take that stuff back.
Right. People say things that get out there and no putting the cat back in the bag after that.
Yep.
Yeah, when I take a break, I just go do something else. Later in the day, I've done stuff out like I come back like it's not even a big deal.
Yeah.
For me, it's not sitting there stewing on it necessarily. It's I go and I just move on. I know because I have confidence that we'll talk about it later if I need to.
Right.
I might come back and be like, you know what, that's not even a big deal anyways. Who cares?
Now, and if you don't need to talk about it, if she does, then she needs to bring that up.
Sure. Yeah, we can
Don't
talk
just
about it.
sit on stuff and let it fester.
Right. No, that's not going to work. Trying to put it away. We're not going to talk about it. It'll be fine, but it's not fine. Right. There are a lot of things that are fine. Right. I got mad at my wife the other day for I don't even remember what. I was annoyed at her, and she knew I was annoyed at her. And then I came back later, and I was like, it's no big deal. I mean, whatever. People make mistakes, and we already know each other's little weaknesses and quirks, and okay, no big deal. We didn't have to talk about it, but if we do have to talk about it, then we will talk about it later.
Yeah.
The better you get at talking about difficult issues, the less stressful it'll be when one comes up.
Mhm.
Because you'll say to yourself, you know what? I'm not going to talk about it now. I'm too mad, but I know we will later. Right.
Mhm.
Or he's mad at me. I know we'll talk about this later. So the better you get at it, the more confident you are in your skills to communicate, the less stressful it'll be when these things come up.
Right. Now, what if you've got a couple where the couple has trouble with communication? They, honest to God, can't talk. They try the talking stick. It's your turn.
Yep.
I won't say anything, but they can't do it. They always have to bring up the past. They always have to take jabs. Now, granted, it's a step family, so it's tit for tat a lot when you start having conversations with step families. What would you say a couple like that just struggles so much communicating? Where's a good place for them to kind of reset to start? Because what they've done in the past hadn't worked. So what's a good place to reset? Would you say maybe a mediator? What would you suggest in that case?
I mean, first of all, they need to be able to be calm when they're talking. People who are getting riled up and throwing jabs at each other, it sounds to me like they're not particularly calm. Very few people calmly think to themselves, you know what? I should be a jerk right now and say a nasty thing. That's not how it happens. It happens when people lose control.
Mhm.
So if it's getting to that point, probably it means they need a break.
Mhm.
If you can come in when you are calm enough, it doesn't mean you have to be not angry at all or not worried or not sad. It just means you have to be in control. So
Mhm.
if you're in control, then yeah, the talking stick method, whether you use a physical one or just, a metaphorical one where we take turns, that's really helpful. If you're having trouble with that, certainly talking to a mediator, a marriage coach, a counselor, whatever it is. I do that a lot with couples where I say, okay, 1 second, one person at a time, you talk, you listen. And then sometimes I have to say, wait, you're not talking right now. What's that?
Not your turn, not your turn.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other person, we just get into each person's world individually. First, I want to hear what you think and how you feel, and you're just listening.
Mhm.
And we should know, by the way, that doesn't mean that he's right and you're wrong. We're assuming that his world is his world right now, and then we'll switch to yours. What does it look like in your world? And if we can both agree, okay, I'm not agreeing with your perception of reality, but I want to hear what you think, then we
Right.
can take turns doing that and we can get through that. And it is hard because you might say something I don't like. You said, well, when you left the empty waffle box in the thing, well, I didn't leave it there. Well, you left. Okay, that's an argument. I'm not arguing with you. When you tell me how you feel about the waffle box, oh, so you feel disrespected. Yeah, I can see why that would happen. Well, that sucks for you. I'm so sorry you felt that. So
Mhm.
I haven't agreed that I've done anything wrong. And maybe I
Right.
haven't. But I know that it's hurting you and I care that it's hurting you. And that is a platform where we can go from that to something better. I'm
Right.
really sorry that happened to you.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've heard of FBI statements.
I think I know what you're talking about, but
Feelings, behavior, impact.
right, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
So we had talked about that several times because it's factual. It's
Yeah,
not emotional, even though it talks about emotion. These are the facts. David did something one day that really made me mad, and he had to go to Columbia, and he left, and it probably took me 30 minutes to come up with my FBI statement because I tried not to use like you. I tried to, do all the things you're supposed to do. And so I sent it. You know what he replied to me? Good use of the FBI statement. I'm like, do you know how long it took me to do that?
not so helpful as a response.
Yeah, yeah. But again, David's a button pusher and a jokester, but we still were able to talk about that. And he knew it bothered me because I did do the FBI statement.
Yeah,
Whereas if I would have just said, you made me mad, that's going to have a different impact than I say, when this happens, I feel such and such.
yeah. If
And
I'm
I'm
talking about
afraid.
you,
Yeah.
I'm inviting you to argue with me. Because if I said
Right.
you did this, you are definitely going to say, no, I didn't. You did that for no, I did it. It's an argument.
Right.
Talking about you, I'm inviting you to argue with me. And if I'm talking about me, I'm inviting you to care.
Right.
A tough day. I didn't, when you yelled at me, I got really upset or scared or whatever. I'm inviting you to join in with how I feel.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. You're not inviting people to argue with you.
If I start the sentence with you, then I am.
Yep.
You did that. I'm inviting you to argue. Look, come on, let's argue about it because I want to talk about what you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. No,
Yeah.
happens all the time. But if I say I'm feeling scared right now, you can't argue with me. No, you're not.
Right.
You don't know. Like this is how I'm feeling. You can say
Yeah.
I shouldn't. You can say that, but you're listening to me right now, and I'm
Mhm.
not asking you to agree that I'm right. I'm asking you to care about how I feel.
Right.
Much better conversation, right? I mean, because the feelings that go on inside is what drives our behavior. People like to think I do what I do because I've thought it out, that I'm being rational, but that's rarely the case. We do what we do because of how we feel about it.
Mhm.
Very few people change their behavior based on intellectual understanding. That's why they show you pictures of blackened lungs and don't just read you off why it's a bad idea. They want to induce a feeling to help you change, right?
Right.
Emotion, the motion part of emotion is not incidental. Emotion is what moves us. It's what motivates us to do something,
Right. It's very important to address things as soon as you can.
right? Which is not necessarily immediately,
Right. Right.
right? As soon as you can. And if you're angry and worked up, you can't.
No.
So it's important to talk about things, but I have definitely waited, days before addressing something because it was bothering me and I
Mhm.
couldn't do it calmly. Okay, so I'll wait a few days. And then
Yeah. And I unfortunately learned a long time ago. I was one of those, it's got to be resolved right now.
Mm,
This is 20 something years ago. It's like, oh, no, we got to solve it right now. We can't go another minute without fixing this kind of thing. Right. And so that person would walk away from me and I would follow them.
yeah, the following, that's a problem. Then that makes it worse, as you no doubt discovered.
It resulted in domestic violence.
Yeah.
Yeah. When someone walks away from you, let them. They need a break.
Yeah. There are things we can do to help that be a little easier. For example, we talk about it beforehand. This is what's going to happen. I will take a break and then I will come back later and we'll talk about it again the next day or whatever. When you walk away, if you're calm enough to say, I can't talk about it now, we'll talk tomorrow, that's better.
Mhm.
Right. But if you're too angry at that point, it's good to have a plan in advance. If I walk away, I will come back 1 hour later and we'll check in. And then you
Right.
come back and you show that you're good for it, that you will come back. And that makes it easier for the other person to wait around.
Mhm.
Because the impulse that makes you follow around is, well, we're not going to solve this. And it's going to
Right.
get worse. And we're going to get divorced. And it's going to be terrible.
Yeah.
So we need to speak to that beforehand and say, that's not what's going to happen. We are going to talk about it. And again, the better we get at the communication skills, the more confident we can be that we will come back and we will talk about this, just not now.
Right. So, do you teach communication skills in the book?
Yeah. The whole thing, it's a step-by-step way to have these difficult conversations. How do we do it? It talks about taking the break. It talks about the exploration phase and the resolution phase. And then it talks about when you're exploring it, how do we do it? And my acronym, which is possibly the best acronym ever, is
Okay, let me write this down.
Yeah, LOVE. You listen, you reflect in your own words, you validate, you empathize. When you are listening to your partner express how they feel, that's the only thing you're doing. Those 4 things and nothing else. Because sometimes people try this, they try explaining, right? Well, no, what happened was, oh, that's not what I meant, right?
Yeah.
Are you mad at me? That's not what I meant. Because I think if you knew what I meant, you'd feel better. And
Sorry you took it that way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that never works. And anybody listening to this can verify with their own experience that has never worked. Never has somebody said, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I meant this. And the other person goes, oh, I'm not mad anymore.
Yeah.
No, it just raises the ante.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing you're doing when you're listening is listening, reflecting your own words, validating and empathizing, and we'll get through it. And then we switch, and then you got to listen to me.
Yeah. And listening's hard.
It is hard. And, it's hard to hold on to your own stuff when you hear things that you don't like being said. But again, we're assuming the other person is doing their part properly. If you're telling me what a big fat jerk I am and how rotten I am, and I don't do this and I don't do that, it's not going to get very far. But if you're telling me how bad you feel when I say X, Y, Z, and how much you wish that we spent more time together, whatever else it is, I can be there and I can say, you know what? I hear how hard it is for you that we're not spending time together. It sounds like you feel lonely. I'm so sorry you feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're connecting. I haven't agreed that I've done anything wrong, and maybe I haven't.
Right.
This is not about who's right or wrong.
Right.
This is about, I care about you.
Yep. It is so much about, or not about, who's right or wrong, like you said. But as a human, we have a tendency to, I need to be right. I need to prove you wrong.
Yes, you can. There's a saying that says you can be right or you can be married.
Yep.
Right. So it comes up several times in the book. We have to disconnect from this who's right and just talk about empathy. That's the bottom line. Do I have empathy for you? Whether you're right or you're wrong, I can have empathy. We find this a little bit easier with our kids, right? Your kid drops their lollipop or something. You have 7 lollipops in the closet, but you don't start sitting there saying, oh, it's no big deal. Like, some people do that. It's not very effective. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, you really wanted that lollipop, right? So whether you're right or you're wrong, I have empathy. It's the same for adults. You know what? You thought that I did X, Y, Z. You interpreted my words this way. Okay. I'm mad at you and you're mad at me. Fine. I have empathy for you. You can have empathy for me. We can be in this together.
Right. And talking about the you, saying you, again, learned that years ago. I had a therapist I actually had to go to with my son's father to learn how to co-parent, which was a joke. But that's one of the things that he told me was you. It automatically puts people on the defense.
Yep.
And do you know how hard it is to not say you sometimes?
Yes.
It's another one of those. It took me an hour to send an email because it's like, okay, Control F. Let me find where I put you and let me try to rephrase that.
It's not always 100% possible because
it's not.
Like when I get yelled at, I feel afraid. Like it doesn't make sense.
Right.
If I can refer to you sort of up. By the way, I'm trying to tell you a story about what's going on for me. You are a character in the story, but I am the main character. So I'm talking about me, right? Here's what happens to me when you yell. When you yell, I feel afraid and I don't want to be around. And it's just very stressful for me. So again, I'm talking about me. I did say you, but it wasn't a story about you. You yell too much. You're selfish. You're an angry person. You need therapy. That's not helpful. I referred to you because you're a character in the story. I cannot tell the story of my life without you being in it.
Right.
But you are one of the side characters and I'm the main character in the story right now. And then we'll switch. And you'll tell me a story about your life where you are the main character and you talk about you. And maybe I come up incidentally, but I'm not the main focus of that story.
Right. You wrote this book how long ago?
It just got published in November.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Did your wife help you write the book?
Insofar as she was my training ground, right? Everything that I do and everything that I teach, I do in my own marriage. So she did not help me write it practically, but certainly, I mean, there's lots of good stories in there about not just the clients that I see, about me and my wife and all the juicy failures we've had. So you can definitely read about, all those ways that I've messed up and what not to do. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of what to do in there, but I use that as an example to show that I'm human. I've made mistakes. I've made those struggles. And this is how it helps me as well.
Right. Kind of like us with Nacho Kids.
There you go.
Yeah. You live it, you figure out how to get through it, and you share that with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do y'all have kids?
We have 4 kids.
4.
4 is a lot of children. And they're
Boys,
all
girls?
girls.
All girls?
I have 4 girls. 2 of them are teenagers. It's tough.
Wow. Do you use a lot of communication tactics with them?
They roll their eyes a lot. My wife also works with people. She's a coach. And so they complain about having therapist parents and, oh, you're speaking too therapist-y. But you know what? It's in their head. And they
Yes.
can't do anything about it. So they're going to grow up one day and they'll never admit it, but they're going to be grateful for what they got from us.
Yeah, because you're planting the seed.
And there's no way they can get it out of their head. Right?
Yeah.
My voice will be in their head for the rest of their lives.
Poor kids. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
What do you think about, I'm guessing you've heard of the 5 positives, 1 negative.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I am less a numbers guy. I mean, John Gottman, who came out with that, big on research, big on numbers, great. It's been helpful. It's helped a lot of people. I think the important thing is to be focusing on the positive.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to count each one, but the negative stuff jumps out at us, sticks in our brain, gets in our face. The positive stuff is very easy to let go, right? The fact that, David takes out the trash and, picked up the milk and went grocery shopping, all these things that you take for granted. And the one time he leaves the waffle box, it drives you crazy. That's totally normal and human.
Right.
And it takes us being focused and saying, you know what, there are so many things they do well, right? Like my wife makes dinner basically every night and I don't cook because I'm lousy and I hate it. And I am grateful every single night.
Mm-hmm.
I am. I feel grateful because otherwise I'd be eating tuna every day.
Yeah. Or waffles.
I say it. Yeah.
If there's any in the freeze.
I'm very, careful to verbalize and just tell her all the things that I appreciate as frequently as I can. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So 5 to 1 or 6 to 1 or 7 to 2, I don't care, but keep focusing on the positive and make sure that you're noticing those things to say them.
We have a Change Your Thinking challenge
There you go.
inside of the academy, and actually a guided one outside of the academy. But one of the things that, we push through that is the learning to listen, but the positiveness. You don't necessarily need to have more positive. You need to have less negative because, like you said, they impact you differently.
Yeah.
Positives just roll off like a duck. The negatives stick with you and go deep down in your soul. So when you focus on trying to change your thinking, you not only try to include more positives, but to not let those negatives even come in.
Honestly, I think the more that you increase the positive, the less the negative will impact you.
Right.
Because if you realize, you know what, my spouse is really cool. She does this and she does this and she does that. And then you say, yeah, but she forgot to refill the milk. It bothers you less. It gives you a backdrop on which to compare it, and it just hurts less. So it's good for everybody. It's good for you to think that way as well.
Yes, 100%. I think it's important to do like positive affirmations and things like that. I know a lot of times when I go to talk to David about things, if being a woman, I just want to vent.
Right.
And he'll say, well, you should have.
No.
Oh, you just.
Right. That's solving. That's not listening, reflecting, validating, or empathizing. That's solving. That's a big thing men do. Oh, you have a problem? I'll solve it for you. No. Shut up. Listen, reflect, validate, empathize. That will get you much farther.
Yep.
Everyone who tries this agrees. Solving the problem right away. Again, you can't solve a problem you don't understand.
Right. You have to understand it. It's like the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, or whatever. Yeah, I read that years ago, and it made sense.
Yep.
Women, we want to talk about it. I'm not saying all women, but we want to talk about it. We want to get it out of our system. We don't want to know what you think we should have done to fix it unless we ask.
Yeah. Right. Men will know very clearly when the woman wants it because they will ask. And if they don't get baited into it. You think it's a question that needs an answer. It's not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Men trying to do that. We see ourselves as the hero. It's our job to make our wives comfortable and happy and take care of them. And if you have a problem, I want to solve it.
Right.
And yet that's not what you're looking for. So I shouldn't give it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And I had a lady that I had on our podcast about learning to listen or something about listening skills, because I know when you are having a conversation that's important, your partner may say something and you want to say something, but you can't because it's not your turn. But you don't want to forget what you're going to say because it's important. But then you're not listening.
Right. You got to put it down. I tell people, look, carry take a little piece of paper and write
That's
down
what I do.
bothering you, right? It's like you didn't like, you want to respond to it, you write it down and you keep listening.
Yep.
Because if you interrupt with that, it's just going to go poorly. But I'm going to forget. Okay, write it down.
Right.
But the truth is, often it's not about getting a point by point rebuttal. It's let me hear where you're at, and then I'll tell you what I'm feeling. I don't like hearing it. That's fine too.
Mm-hmm. So tell us where people can find you.
Best place is thecommunicationbook.com, where you can find the book. There's the first 2 chapters are there for free in PDF or an audiobook. I did the audiobook, so you can get 7 hours and 29 minutes of Raffi Bilek speaking to you.
Oh, wow. I'm going to play that at night.
There you go. So that's the best place. And from there, there's, links to my other sites and stuff where I have writings, blogs elsewhere as well, but that's the best place. And people who want to reach out with questions or need some further help, I'm there for it. And, just looking to get the word out and make the world a happier place.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you for having me. And I look forward to seeing the Nacho book when it comes out.
Yes.
And I hope you enjoy listening to me for 7 hours and 29 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nacho Kids podcast. Find us online at nachokids.com. Until next time, remember, life is good when you nacho.